So, welcome guys to our third lecture here. This particular lecture we're going to be focusing all on mat creation, and that's pretty much what we're going to do for this week. So this particular lecture we're going to focus on one aspect of mat creation, and then on Wednesday we'll focus on another aspect of mat creation. Now this week tends to be a heavier week for you guys than your first week, so keep that in mind with these assignments. As far as the one you're going to want to do tonight, you're going to want to get this one done or as close to done as possible by Wednesday, because once we hit Wednesday we have a whole other project that we need to do that's just as involved and just as entailed. So again, make sure that for this week that you're staying up on what you need to do, and this is especially important for my online students because I don't see you guys as much as my on-campus students. So make sure that you're starting your stuff early throughout the week in case you run into any issues. You can ask me, and like I said, it also so you don't fall behind with your second week or your Wednesday's assignment. Now, we've geared this entire week, which is really only 2 lectures and 2 labs, but to generating mats, or what mats are. It's very important for a compositor to understand how to create mats. In fact, this is how we do composites. We need to have mats in order to do this. So this is a pivotal kind of fundamental skill you need to learn how to do if you want to be a compositor. And like I said, there's 2 main ways we do it, and we're going to kind of split this up into the 2 different lectures. Now, when I talk about a mat, remember that word, mat, it just comes from when we used to mat areas of the film from being exposed to light. So you guys know it essentially as an alpha channel, right? So it's that black and white image that determines what you see as opposed to what you don't see. So you would take this, right? We know this as an alpha, right? Think of it as 1 and 0. It's data. So we take this and we multiply it by this, right? So once you take your alpha, multiply it by your color, it gives you a pre-multiplied RGB that looks like this, right? And again, this is a fundamental skill that you need to know how to do. Like I said, with compositors, this is how we put things together, right? We need mats to do this. So this process is called pre-multiplication. So if I ask you guys, what is pre-multiplication? Can you explain it? Who can explain pre-multiplication without looking at the slide? Don't read the slide and explain it to me. The color is multiplied by the alpha, right? And that's what gives us this. Again, we're going to take this, multiply it by this, and it gives us this, okay? That is what we would call a pre-multiplied image. That means the transparency or the alpha has been embedded into the color. All right, so when you render out of Maya, whatever, if you're using RenderMan or Arnold or Mental Ray or V-Ray, whatever renderer you're using, you're going to usually get an alpha channel with that render. And most of the time, the image will already be pre-multiplied for you. And you'll notice this, you'll see this, depending on the renderer you're using, there'll be a little flag that'll usually be checked on, pre-multiply on or off. It's usually on by default, and you'll leave it on. Now, as far as film and video, we're not at this point where we can generate real-time stuff on the fly that looks usable. Now, I know you guys might be thinking, but wait a minute, they do this on the weather every night, because I see the weatherman in real time showing me the weather. He's standing in front of a green screen. Well, that's actually hardware that's doing that. It's Ultimate hardware that drives that they can do it in real time. And the technique of how it's being done is a lot different than how we're doing this here, right? And we want to be able to produce the best results. You got to think of the weatherman. They don't really care about his edge. They just want to make sure that the green is gone, right? But when we're in the composite working on a feature, we're more concerned about our edge quality and the overall look of the mat. So doing that real-time stuff wouldn't really get us to where we want to be yet. Now they're working on it, but as of right now, we have to do this stuff in post. We have to generate these mats in post. And there's 2 different ways that they do this. Hand-drawn, which is what we're going to talk about today. This is the rotoscoping method. You guys ever heard that word rotoscoping or rotoscope? All right, we'll talk a little bit about what this is here in a moment. And then we have procedural mat creation, which is the green screen and blue screen stuff. So now what we're doing is we're looking at certain characteristics within an image to help us generate this mat, pull this key. So let's talk about roto, and this is what we're going to focus on today. And we can't really talk about roto without mentioning this guy. There's a little bit of history here. Max Fleischer. Have you ever heard the name Max Fleischer before? Maybe, probably not. All right. He developed this technique called the rotoscope process, where he took his brother and literally filmed his brother in the clown suit running around. And then what he did was he took those frames, projected them onto frosted glass, and traced over. And that little clown right there was the first rotoscope. He's called, I think his name's Coco the Clown. So Max Fleischer, he had all these cartoons he did in the 30s and the 40s with the rotoscoping process, stuff like Superman, Popeye, Betty Boop. He developed this technique. Now, let me show you a video that will explain it. Now, again, they're just doing different colors so you can see this the different areas that they needed to roto out. Right, showing stuff that's difficult, lots of movement with motion blur. Those are always things you want to show on a mat creation type of demo reel. Again, more rotoscoping. Also rotoing the reflection. That's something that you have to think about doing sometimes. You forget about these types of rotos. Notice it's a lot of humanoids, obviously, because a lot of stuff that you have to roto is human. So showing humans rotoscoped out on a demo reel, again, they're just color coding it so you can see the different layers of what they had to roto out. And again, this is part of the process. So before we can put any of our great, awesome matte paintings or really great digital sets, we need to have good roto. We need to have good mats. If we don't have good mats, it doesn't matter how good your set looks, right? Because your mat's not going to fall through. See, look at his hair. You notice his hair doesn't look exactly right? Now it looks right. But look at the original shapes here. We'll talk about this here in a moment. So look at his look at the shapes around his hair right here. You notice it's not getting all the detail. It's close, but it's not getting all the little flyaways and all the little wispy hairs, right? They use another technique called a luma key to get all those little fine-tuned little hairs. And then they put it all together so you can see. There's the final mat. You can see we're getting all those little flyaways around his hair. If you look on the top, again, that's a different technique, and then they're adding it into their roto to get all that. And again, the biggest part with mats, guys, is your edge detail. So paying attention to what your edge looks like, right? Going through and making sure you're getting all this detail, all this hair, right? And that it's getting good detail throughout. Again, it's very important when you're doing your mat work. The most important thing is your edge and how good your edge looks. So not only is roto used for just generating mats, it's pretty extensively used for doing stereo conversion. So being able to take an image that's in 2D and convert it into 3D so we can watch it with 3D glasses. All right, this process uses a lot of rotoscope. So what you're seeing here are the Bezier splines, and everything that's color-coded is stuff that had to get rotoed out and placed so they could place it in Z-space. You got to remember when they're rotoing for stereo conversion, they have to usually roto stuff out so they can place it where it needs to go in Z, or create what's called a depth pass. In fact, I think I have a video here I can show you what a depth pass looks like. Look at all the hair they're having to roto. See all those open splines? All those little hair strands they're having to roto and get out and extract out. So this particular type of work, again, there's more hair, not very difficult. This is not difficult to do, but it is tedious, right? It looks complicated because there's a lot of stuff going down there, but you're essentially just tracing. There's just a lot of tracing. Who knows how many hours have been put on this shot here? It's not rocket science, but it is tedious, and it can be difficult sometimes when you're trying to do your in-betweens. See, drawing the shapes are no problems. It's how they interpolate between your keyframes. That's where it becomes an issue. All right, so here's just more matte stuff we can look at. Again, more matte reels. This is stereo conversion stuff. So some of this stuff that looks weird colored like this is just for stereo. And they're converting stuff from 2D into 3D. And they're just showing you the different colors so you can see the different shapes. There's something from Harry Potter. Notice that they're rotoing the original plate. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Not the composite. So sometimes we'll work on the original plate, like in this case. See, that's just the original plate from photography, right? It still has the green screen in the background. It's not been colored. Everything looks very flat, and that's what they're using to do their conversion with. Other times you'll get shots that are much more finished, like something like this. Look at Harry's. You notice they have glasses on Harry, right? The biggest thing to deal with, or that can be a problem when you're doing stereo conversion, is glass, right? Because where is it placed in the depth? And you can see in this case, they're just ignoring the glass. They're saying there's no glass in his glasses there. So I think I have a video here from Stereo D. Yes, all right. So you can see them. This is Stereo D, by the way. This was my buddies. Did I just tell you those? My friends were in town that work here. And this is their process of how they're creating their depth passes. Now you guys learned about depth passes, right? What a depth pass is? Who can tell me what a depth pass is? It's an idea of a depth pass. From the camera. Very good, right? So that's how stereo conversion works. It's all about creating a depth pass from the shot. Once you have the depth in the shot, or the Z information in the shot, then you can start moving and sliding stuff around to create the new eye, which that's essentially what you're doing. So when you're looking at this shot from Titanic, they're using a combination of scene geometry plus the heroes at the front of the ship there. They're rotoscoped. But you see that's the depth map they created from the shot. So once they have the depth, then they can start shifting and moving this stuff around. But like I was saying, a lot of this work is roto work. So these jobs are available, but keep in mind you're doing a lot of roto. And if roto is not your thing, or if you just can't stand to sit there and try to roto all day, then this is probably not the job for you. That being said, if you don't mind doing stuff like this, these types of jobs are always available. Although it's shrinking and shrinking, it seems like every day. They're wiggling between the left and right eyes. That's what they were doing right there, so you can see the depth. And like I said, it's all generated. So this is all roto. See how they're rotoing everything out of the shot here? And color grading it to place it in proper depth. Now, when you guys roto tonight, you're not going to need to roto this sophisticated. You're just basically rotoing silhouette. You can see how this shape's different luminance than this shape, than this shape. All this stuff's getting rotoed out. So it's a lot of roto, to say the least, when you're doing your stereo conversion work. So I was talking to my friends, and they said Legend 3D, which is another studio that does all this 3D conversion. They said they have software on your machines that keeps track of every single keystroke you're doing. So they know if you're sitting at your machine, but you haven't typed on your keyboard for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They keep track of you that. They micromanage you that much. Every time you leave your desk, you have to clock out. So even if you want to go to the bathroom, you have to clock out for 5 minutes to go use the bathroom before you come back to your desk and clock out. Yeah. That was at Legend 3D. Legend 3D just closed their studios in Toronto, and they shipped everything out to China. So they're now in China working. And we've got, this is Stereo D, which they're in Canada, and Toronto working here. And like I said, these are 9 to 6 days, 6 days a week. And that's a common schedule that you'll work. Like I said, we have a lot of students that have worked here, or that are working here. So if you guys look, he's working on some shot in the beginning of the film. There's the depth he's creating, and you can see it's just all roto nodes. See all these roto nodes he's using? And each one of these roto nodes basically takes up one of these actors or one of these objects on the table there, and he's grading them accordingly, right? So again, roto can be used not only for just generating mats, which is primarily how we use it, but also for doing 3D effects, stereo conversion, and stylized types of techniques like this. This movie came out, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I guess. Maybe not quite so long ago. A Scanner Darkly. Have any of you guys ever heard of this movie? It came out in the theaters and like tanked. Like no one went and saw it. The movie was shot entirely live action. There's a live action version of this movie, but no one will ever see it because every single scene that's in the movie got this rotoscoping process put over it. And it gave it a very unique look. Like there's Robert Downey Jr. right there. You can see there's Keanu. or Neo, right? Like I said, it's called A Scanner Darkly. Unfortunately, for me, it's just not that interesting of a movie. I think it's based off of an old 70s sci-fi book or something like that, which was probably better. I've tried to watch it a few times, and every time I fall asleep. So I usually give a movie 3 tries. It was the third time I fall asleep, I'm like, all right, I can't watch you. There's something about you. Also, this over here to the right, I put this up here just because I liked kind of like the idea of it. This is something that the YouTube community did, where they all took a video, a Taylor Swift video. I don't know, they had like 40 or 50 different artists from YouTube. Each kind of roto a shot from the video, and then they all kind of cut it together and put it together. I'll keep the audio off so you don't have to listen to it. But if you watch it, you can see just all the different styles and techniques people are kind of doing with the way they're doing the rotoscoping process over there. So that's on YouTube. You can watch it. I forget what song it is. Just type in Taylor Swift roto and it'll pull that up. So like I said, you'll see this roto technique used not only for just generating mats, but for doing the conversion and for doing more stylized stuff like you see here. So, what is rotoscoping? Like I said, we just use it as a generic term for manually extracting, isolating, or affecting a portion of an image, right? That's basically it. The process creates a black and white image that we can use as either a matte or a mask or some type of holdout or fill shape. These mats can be used to create transparency. That would be pre-multiplying it, in this case using it as an alpha. They can also be used as masks to isolate areas, right? The most important one is probably the last one. It is tedious work. That's why I always say give yourselves enough time when you're doing your assignment tonight. It's going to take you guys longer than you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, I'm just tracing, no big deal. It takes longer to do it than you think. So give yourself enough time to get it done. Very important. I always say give yourselves 8 hours per shot this week. So 8 hours for your roto, which is a day's worth of work, and then 8 hours for the keying assignment, which is another day's worth of work. And start kind of thinking of your stuff, breaking it down into hours and days. When you work on something, you need to keep track of the hours. How many hours is it taking you to do this? And then you can start to think of it in 8-hour blocks, which are days. This is what you're doing in lab tonight. It's just 25 frames, okay? So it's completely doable. Like I said, give yourself 8 hours on this. Yes, we're going to be strict with this because, like I said, if you don't have good mats, you don't have a good composite. It doesn't matter how good your CG looks. If your mats and your edges don't hold up, the shot's going to break very quickly. Pay attention to how you're going to do this and how you're going to build it, right? I want to see edge detail, making sure that you're getting all the detail around his head, his ear. We'll go through it. I'm going to show you the script so you can see my script. Just so you guys know, I did this in about 2 hours. So give yourself about 8 hours to get it done. Now when you roto out, or when you render out, you're going to render out 2 different movie files. You're going to give me a matte movie, which is going to look like this. It's a black and white movie of your matte. You can also composite over gray. That's fine too. If you want to do a midpoint gray and just composite over that, that's fine as well. All right. So as far as the roto process goes, you have to understand everyone's going to roto a little bit differently. So I can't just give you rules. Do it this way, this way, this way, this way, you're good. It just doesn't work like that. There's too many variables in this. You know, every one of you guys is going to draw the shape a little bit differently around his head for his head shape. So it's going to kind of dictate how you set your keys and how you move your shapes around. So I can give you kind of practices, best practices when you're thinking about doing the roto, right? And you're going to notice in lab tonight, I don't show you how I draw my shapes. And there's a reason why I don't. Because when I used to show you guys that, you guys would just try to copy it like I was doing it. And that's not the way it works, all right? You guys have to draw your own shapes, and like I said, depending on how you draw, it's going to dictate how you set your keys. Okay, so roto practices. Different types of footage will dictate the different types of approaches on the shot, right? And just think about the different types of shots that you have, as opposed to, you know, just having a medium shot where it's just like this up, and that's it, as opposed to maybe a full body shot, someone's walking across the frame. What if the camera's moving? All this stuff, that's entailed in a shot is going to dictate how you approach your roto. Okay. There's also a delicate balance. There's often a delicate balance between how much detail you put into a spline. A spline is just a shape, a roto spline shape. When you start versus how much you'll have to spend modifying things as you refine. Basically, what this means is that when you're starting off, it's best to keep your shape simple and just use more. All right. So, like if you draw a shape that has to go around an arm, don't draw a shape that has all these little dots. The problem is, when you try to animate this, this is going to be very complicated for you to do. It's going to drive you nuts. I know you guys are saying, well, in the video, I just saw Jack Black. They have a shape, and they're doing it like this, and they're fine with it. You have to remember, what I'm showing you guys in the shape, those are seasoned roto artists that have been working 9 to 6 every day for about a year or so, right? So they have their workflow down, right? So there's often a delicate balance, right? So when you're starting off, keep it simple. Right? Because like I said earlier, the problem is not going to be when you're drawing the shapes. The problem is animating the shapes and how they go from one keyframe into the other. Use your fall off on the shapes or your motion blur settings, obviously specifically for the Jedi. As he's swinging around, his arms are pretty motion blurred. So you can turn motion blur on the shapes so you can see it. I'll show you guys that in a moment. You can do it that way, or you can use the fall off. Also, stay organized, right? Just a good idea, right? We can take off with your shapes. This is a good rule for life. Stay organized, right? With your particular script, what I mean is keep your shapes organized. Always think about your script as not just your script, but eventually it's going to be someone else's script. So when they pick it up, they can hit the ground running. They're not figuring out, well, what is he doing here? I don't understand why this is here and that's there. Keep it organized for the person who gets it after you. Not only also for you, but it's also just as important for whoever gets it or eventually gets it. Also, spline interpolation. This is a big one. This is the one that usually students stumble over, right? When you're drawing your points, these little points on your shapes, so you always want to keep them in the same relative position. Look at for example, look at these two frames. This is just Mickey's hand, or a cartoon's hand, just waving like this across the frame. Now look how I drew it. So, for example, point 1 is on the pinky at the top. Now I go to frame 9 and I get it lined up, but I've moved my points all around. So now look where point 1 is. It's kind of in the middle here. I've just kind of moved my points to draw it. Now keep in mind, I've lined it up. It looks great on frame 1. And I go to frame 9, it looks fine. But the problem is the in-between. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those frames that Nuke has to interpolate between this guy and this guy. Guess what you think? What do you guys think is going to happen to the hand? Obviously, you see all the points in a different position. So if I show you the in-betweens, the hand gets completely jacked up. All right? Look at this. That's not right at all. Okay, so keep your points in the same relative position. I'll give you an example. When you're starting to roto the Jedi, start with his head. It's usually the easiest point, the easiest spot to start with. But you're going to draw a shape that goes around the Jedi's head. And you're going to put points, pull out your curve to get the handles and get the curve of the shape. So if you put a point, for example, right here by his ear, as he goes through that animation and swings that lightsaber, that point needs to stay right there on the ear. Right? You don't want it moving up on top of his head or down by his chin. That's going to create that type of wavy or that weird type of interpolation between your keyframes. It's always best to keep your points in that same relative position as much as you can. You don't want it sliding up and down. So if I draw a point, I'm drawing a curve of the arc and I put a point right on the top of the head. As he moves through, keep that point on the top of the head. Now, sometimes you'll run into an issue where you won't get the detail that you need. So you're thinking, well, it looks good on this frame, but then when it goes to this frame, there's this area that I need to fix. So obviously, you want to you're thinking, this is your mind thinking, I need to move this point so I can line it up, right? But that's not the right way to think about it. The better way to think about it is, I'll just go back and get it with an extra shape. So if you have a curve that your shape is not getting completely, go ahead and finish the animation of that shape, and then come back where that area is where you need that curve and just draw a new shape to get that area. like I said, with students, it's better that you use more shapes and just keep your shapes simple. Now, as you roto, you'll develop a workflow and a style that works for you. That's just when you're starting off, that's best practice on how to use it.